Hey guys, Fox here, and today it is time to talk about the 2024 All-UFL team for the United Football League. Yes, the 2024 All-UFL team has officially come out, and well, there's some pretty shocking picks on here that the league decided to have on here. Some that are really good, and yeah, so we're gonna go over each single person that made the list, and then talk about a few of the guys who did end up getting snubbed for this list. So without further ado, let's get started with the All-UFL offense. Now, the offensive QB was Adrian Martinez. This should not be a shock to anybody. Barring a colossal upset, he will be the league MVP. Definitely deserved the All-UFL QB spot. Now, the one RB spot, yes, they only had one, was Jacob Sailors. I do agree with this. Sailors was a very dynamic player this year. The fact is he was great at both out of the backfield as a receiver and a running back. Definitely deserved it. Now, the wide receivers, we're going to see a lot of, let's just say, a lot of discontention with it. Hakeem Butler, of course, nobody's going to deny that. But David Davis and Marcus Sims are ones that we'll get to later, but are ones that definitely are going to cause a lot of people some issues. Now, for tight end Jay Sternberger, I don't really think this should be a big shock. The fact is that he didn't have nearly the amount of receptions a lot of other guys did, yet was still up there in the overall receiving crown for the year, so definitely deserved that. Really solid. Then your O-linemen, Zach Johnson and Cole Levaio, are your guards. Mike Panasiuk is your center. Jared Jones-Smith is one of your tackles, and Bobby Evans is your other one. So that leaves 3 Stallions, 4 Battlehawks, 1 Showboat, 1 Panther, 1 Brahma, and 1 Renegade for the offense. As for defense, the defense we have Carlos Davis and Daniel Wise of the Stallions and Panthers being your 2 D linemen, your interior D linemen, I should say. Then your 2 outside linebacker / edge picks ended up being Breland Speaks and Chris Odom of the Panthers and Roughnecks, respectively. Then Devontae Beckett of the Brahmas and Willie Harvey of the Battlehawks were your linebackers. Then your corners were DeAndre Baker of the Defenders, Nate Brooks of the Panthers, Ajeen Harris of the Renegades, and your 2 safeties were Kai Nakua and AJ Thomas. For the most part, this is a pretty solid list. I think there's only going to be a couple people that have any issues with any of them. Really solid group. And then your All-USL special teams where you have the really big shocker. You have your long snapper, Jordan Obear for the Panthers, Chris Rowland, returner for the Defenders, Market King, punter for the Renegades. And then the big one was Jake Bates, kicker for Michigan, which is definitely the most shocking of all of them. As for some of the biggest snubs, you have to start immediately at the wide receiver position. Yes, Jontre Kirkland, Justin Hall, Tyler Vaughns are definitely some of those guys going to get a lot of people up in like hey, how did those guys not make it? Now, the fact is that I do kind of get why they would vote for Sims and David Davis. The fact is, Davis was pretty much the only truly reliable showboat. Vinny Papelli was great, but in terms of a legit deep threat type of guy, Davis was definitely the number 1 receiver on that team. And then Marcus Sims had a lot of weeks where he was having incredible games. And he did miss 2 games, so if you add his 2 games, he would have been right on in there in the top 4 receiving yards. So I can get that one. But of course, Tyler Vaughns was Luis Perez's number 1 target. Yes, I know Sal Canelo was there as well and had more receptions, but overall, Vaughns was just incredible. But Justin Hall, despite having a multitude of quarterbacks, is the one I really don't get. Look, Justin Hall of all these guys should have been on there. No offense to Kirkland, but Hall was quite easily the second best receiver in the league this year. When you're talking about having to play with Garantano, Sinnett, and Henderson, you can make a very legitimate argument that of guys who had, substantial playing time, that he had the 2 worst QBs in the league in Sinnett and Garantano throwing him the football, yet he still finished tied for the receptions crown with Jontre Kirkland, but he had a much better catching percentage from targets versus, drops and all that. They both had the same amount of TDs, and Justin Hall had a lot more yak, meaning he was getting a bunch of extra yardage. The fact is, Justin Hall was your yak crown. He had the most yards after catch. I think that overall he was definitely the biggest snub on the offensive side of the ball. He definitely should have been on there over Sims or Davis. Now, as for Kirkland and Vaughns, I can see arguments for them, and I wouldn't be against you putting them up over Sims or Davis, for sure. I think that overall, Sims and Davis, I get Sims and Davis for certain reasons, but overall, Kirkland was a massive target for the Brahmas, especially when you consider the fact they did have injuries, and their next best target was Cody Latimer, who was a lot farther down in the list. Not to the same degree as, Houston's next best receiver was, but still a lot farther down. I don't know, Justin Hall, biggest snub for the receiver position, followed by Kirkland or Vaughns, is both of them just probably Kirkland, but I don't know, man. Davis and Sims, and I get, some people saying you're just going off the top receiving yards and all that. Look, at the end of the day, right, Marcus Sims every game had basically that 1 deep shot, and that's why I can get why he was there. But we saw C.O.C. Mariner come in very late and have a very similar type of style to Marcus Sims. Whereas with Justin Hall was a baller for a lot of those games for the Roughnecks. I don't know. I think Justin Hall was definitely a massive snub, and then Kirkland or Vons was probably a snub as well. Now, as for the defensive side, I think that overall the linebackers and DBs are actually pretty solid. I don't really have any argument against any of them. The fact is, like a guy like Frank Gidna, missed a lot of games, and the fact is the two guys that were named on the team definitely deserved it. The defensive line is where you have a bit of concern. Look, Daniel Wise is one of those guys who I'm still kind of shocked he's on there. Of all those guys, he's the one that most people probably have not heard of. He was not a stat stuffer guy. But again, the defensive line wasn't, or the interior D line, it wasn't like, look, there's no example as bad as like Keontae Shad missing it last year despite, like being second place in total sacks. But in terms of the defensive ends is where you have a bit of concern. Look, I'm a big fan of Chris Odom. I've talked about that before. But over Malik Fisher, I don't know about that one. I don't know if he should have been there above Fisher. I'm going to be real with you. I think Fisher is one of those guys who just keeps on getting underrated. The fact is he had an unbelievable season with DC this year. Yes, Chris Odom was also incredible. He's had a very solid season, 5.5 sacks, 8 TFLs. But the fact is Malik Fisher was just, I think, a slightly better defensive end this year. I think that concerning the fact that the Houston team had a much better overall D-line. I mean, that whole D-line, even with the injuries, was still talent-wise overall one of the best D-lines in the league, at least for pure talent, naturally. So to have a guy like Chris Odom get it, I don't know. I think Malik Fisher should have gotten it. And as for Daniel Wise, it's hard to think of exactly who would be an interior D-lineman that's better, but you could pretty much make a case for a lot of guys. At the end of the day, if you have somebody who, stat-wise, put up less than 2 sacks and 20 tackles, you can make a damn good case for basically any interior D-lineman to make it. But of course, being a D-lineman is much more than just the stats. It's about how you impact plays and all that. But as for the defensive end, Chris Odom above Malik Fisher, personally, I don't agree with that. Now, as for the kicker, I'm going to be real with you. Bates should not have been on this list. I'm not shocked at all he got it, and I wouldn't be shocked if he wins Special Teams Player of the Year. Here's the deal. As a Panthers fan, I can tell you this. Yes, he was incredible to start the season. The last few games, he fell off hard. You gave the Kicker of the Year award, basically. No matter what, Special Teams Player of the Year is either going to be him or Roland. You're giving Kicker of the Year to a guy who kicked 77%. Look, I'm sorry. I don't care in a world if 5 of those kicks are blocked. I don't care if there's a world where no offensive linemen do anything for him. You're talking about a guy who had a 77 field goal percentage, is getting it over guys like Coughlin and, of course, Andre Schmidt. Schmidt was 90%. He missed 2 field goals. He had the most points of any kicker at 57. He also kicked a 61-yarder. Now, was he kicking as many as Bates did to start the year? No. But he still proved he could kick a super long field goal. The fact is, yes, Bates had those clutch game winners. When you look at the second half of the season, especially in Week 10, he missed the field goal against Birmingham. It's just incredibly hard to stomach the fact that we're giving the Kicker of the Year award to a guy who kicked 77%. As I talked about before in the Power Rankings video, that is one of the lowest totals in the entire league. That is tied with Ramis Ahmed for the lowest or second lowest in the league, with only Santosa below him. So every other kicker, most kickers have a better percentage than him, and he's getting it. I'm sorry, that just goes against the entire point of a kicker. The whole point of a kicker is you want a guy who, when you trot him out there, is gonna make the kick. We don't know if Bates is gonna make the kick when he trots out there. You know Schmidt is gonna make it. When he misses it, it's a shock. When Bates misses it, it's like, oh well, he's been doing that. So I hate to say it, but the fact that Bates got it, it doesn't feel good. So because of that, I'm gonna say that Andre Schmidt was definitely snubbed. So overall, I would say that the real 3 snubs, naturally, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified so simple any videos. But in terms of the 3 guys I really think ended up getting snubbed, I'd say Schmidt definitely got snubbed, Fisher got snubbed really bad, and of course, the worst of all was definitely Hall. Those 3 guys I think were definitely the 3 biggest snubs overall. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments about who you think got snubbed. Do you agree with the list and all that? And as always, guys, have a great night.